Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of What's It Like? I'm your host, Jay Liebenguth, and thanks so much for stopping by. Really appreciate it for taking the time. We got a great guest for you today, as we always do. Keegan Korf, a resource in the Omaha Public Schools, but I'm going to let Keegan say exactly what her role is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jay.
It's our pleasure.
I am the lead teacher of digital citizenship in partnership with Common Sense Media for the Omaha Public Schools.
So, does some of the budget come from Common Sense or just some of the curriculum?
Both.
Okay.
All of the above, yes.
Right.
So I am employed by Omaha Public Schools, but also by Common Sense Media. So it's kind of a 50-50 role that I play with our district. So I wear a lot of different hats.
I want to get into some of those hats here in a second, but I do want to also understand the role between Common Sense and the Omaha Public Schools.
Yes, absolutely. So the history, as I understand it, we've had a very long-standing partnership with Omaha Public Schools as Common Sense Media. Common Sense is a nonprofit organization based in San Francisco, California, that's been around since 2003. Since about 2008, there's been a deep partnership with Omaha Public Schools. There have been two people in this role prior to me as well. So it's very, very important in OPS that we have somebody who helps to support the curriculum that Common Sense Media and their pillar Common Sense Education provides. And that's always been a great partnership and priority. And it's shifted a lot over the last 2 years to become even more of a priority as OPS really increases access to technology and to devices in our classrooms for our students.
Are there school districts within the state of Nebraska that also depend on that partnership with Common Sense?
So there are school districts across the state and across the country who utilize resources of Common Sense education. A lot of schools use Common Sense. You could walk into school districts across Nebraska and say, how many of you are familiar with Common Sense Media? And, a lot of people would raise their hand, especially people who teach technology or who are library media specialists. This content has been heavily utilized for a long time, but I am on a very small team with my friends at Common Sense. There are 5 of us who do this outreach and work directly with schools. I'm the only one who's directly embedded in a school district system to support deep and wide.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah. So it's kind of nice because Common Sense is extremely appreciative of the feedback that I can provide on behalf of our teachers who I work directly with every day. We also at Omaha Public Schools get insight to the latest and greatest resources that Common Sense has available to help support our students, but also our teachers and the families in our community too.
I was going to say, the fact that you're embedded likely means that some of the curriculum is here first.
Yes.
Would that be fair to say?
It is. We absolutely, as there have been changes through the organization and as they develop new content or new resources, Omaha Public Schools is always kind of a hub of like, who are we going to get to test this content? Who's going to provide the most feedback? And luckily we have an amazing group of teachers who we reach out to say, hey, there's this new thing happening. Do you want to check it out? Are you open to providing some feedback? And we have very willing parties.
So let's get into I know an average day, there's no such thing anymore, but what is your role on a regular basis?
Absolutely. So to give you just a little bit of background, this is really the first time in our school district's history that we've intentionally allotted budget dollars to really increase access to technology across the district. A lot of our schools in the country, a lot of our schools across the state are going to a one-to-one model of technology, meaning that for every one student they have one technology device to support them. Now, Omaha Public Schools is a district that has 52,000 students, so that model one-to-one is really challenging and not necessarily going to work district-wide, but we're really amping up access to devices. So this year alone, we have put 13,000 devices in the hands of secondary students as part of a 4 to 5 year cycle of technology increase. We started focusing on increasing access and providing different technology resources for our secondary teachers, followed by secondary students, which is the phase where we are right now. The next phase will be supporting our elementary teachers and then providing increased access to our elementary students. And then we'll start that cycle over again. And this will be the plan of technology, basically increased access, but also making sure that we are having a plan for what to do with technology that becomes obsolete. You know, if you have a computer for 6, 7, 8 years,
Sure.
we know it's time for a new computer.
That's right.
Well, we've got devices in our school district that are sometimes 10 plus years old that we still try to support and try to update, and it's just time for new technology. So anyway, as we started to increase that access to technology, we wanted, under very, very great visionary leadership, our director of technology, Rob Dixon, for the school district, very much wanted to lay a foundation of digital citizenship prior to increasing this access to technology. And that's kind of how my role was developed, and it became a full-time role within our instructional technology department. So as we started to increase access to technology, we're utilizing resources from Common Sense Education to make sure that we have a solid foundation built for digital citizenship skills. So schools are intentionally teaching digital citizenship skills in the classroom, but they're also providing education, outreach, and support to parents and families in their school communities as well, to make sure that what's being taught in the classroom is also what's being supported at home. We can teach how to be safe, secure, smart, and responsible online at school all day long. But if that is lost when the child goes home because parents don't know how to necessarily support that technology use, then it kind of defeats the purpose, and vice versa, right? So we really talk about having a whole community approach to digital citizenship education, and that's what we're trying to do. So that's my purpose. That's why I'm here. So I work to support all 93 schools and programs in our district, but also have the capacity to support statewide to an extent. And I work as often as I can and am able to provide this education and professional development to districts and ESUs across the state also. So that's the umbrella overview. So a day in the life.
I guess my question is, it's not just about that books become obsolete and that more information is more evergreen on the internet, or that you're just trying to teach kids how to have a better online persona. You see this technology and education as much more hand in glove.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. We can't just expect to, and I've seen this happen a multitude of different ways. As schools, receive funding to put toward technology, oftentimes we're saying, well, here you go, here's your new laptop, here's your new iPad.
Where are the games?
Go to town. Right. And if we just do that and just hand over the technology without really providing a foundation of how to use it safely and responsibly, then we've kind of turned on a water faucet that's really, really hard to turn back off. So we want to just make sure it's really a system building and a foundation building, building a culture of digital citizenship in our schools. So it's been a process. I mean, this is, I'm going into my second year in this role, and year one was just really starting to lay the groundwork and building a cohort and a group and working with a cohort and a group of teachers who really believe in this mission. And after that, also alongside trying to work with administrators to help them understand how important and valuable that this is as well. And we're there, This past year was the first year that we earned district-wide certification in digital citizenship through those Common Sense resources, and that's huge. I mean, that was such a proud moment for me in my role, because I saw, wow, all our schools are really working toward this common goal, and they really believe that this is important and this is valuable, and they get it. When you say to a principal, hey, we're going to have you sit at the table and tell us what your instructional technology needs are, what type of devices you think will be best in your classroom, what will work in your school, what won't work in your school. You tell us what you need, and we'll do our best to try to help support that for you. But if this is what we're going to do, and as we provide access to this, here's what we have to do in your school to make sure that kids are being safe and responsible. You tell a principal that in there, you bet they totally understand. They want what is best for their kids and students, and they understand how important and how valuable this work is.
Putting devices in the hands of elementary school age kids has got to be a bit of a challenge, because some would argue, I would assume, that that's too early. But we know that that's not the case, because most every kid you see has a phone in their hands, whether it's their parent's phone or their own device.
That's right.
How does that begin to translate in terms of a learning environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, that's a good question. So I want to be very clear that while we are increasing access to technology, it doesn't mean that we don't have any technology right now in our schools. So our elementary schools, while we're focusing on them a year or two down the road from this point, they'll be kind of in our next wave, they still do have access to these devices, like you say. A lot of them utilize iPads, the touch devices. That touch feature of an iPad is a little bit easier for young kids to kind of manipulate and work with. But, you know, from a learning perspective, elementary teachers have not only an immense foundational knowledge across all subject areas of what they're teaching, but elementary teachers are incredible when it comes to pedagogy. And they really, really know their stuff in terms of what helps to support children and learning. Middle school and secondary school teachers, secondary and high school age teachers do as well, but as a secondary teacher, you're really more content-based focused, right? So I was a high school English teacher. I knew my content inside and out, and I could help support kids in reading and writing and speaking, all of those things. But an elementary teacher, they're very experimental when it comes to working with technology. They're very open to different styles of learning. They do a lot of like station rotation activities that they incorporate technology. Their classroom environments just look a little bit different. So that's a great place for kids to start to gain exposure to technology and learning and what that could look like. That doesn't mean that like a fourth grade classroom of kids is sitting down in front of a laptop on their computer screens or behind a computer screen all day long by any means, because that's just not what's happening. A, they don't have enough technology for that to be happening, but B, they're just using it differently. An elementary classroom doesn't look the same as a high school classroom where a kid would walk around, you know, from one class to another with their device and open it up and do their learning in social studies and then math. So they're getting exposure, I would say, like in smaller bursts. So they're not necessarily staring at it the whole time. That amount of screen time that they're seeing when it comes to it being a learning tool, it's not all that high at the elementary age.
You mentioned earlier about this idea that we're trying to build digital citizens, and I've heard you mention safety and responsibility. Tell me about some of those things that are very important regardless of what age group they are.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, a question that I get a lot from parents pertaining to that is, well, what's the appropriate age to get a kid a cell phone? What's the appropriate age to let my child be on social media? Like, how old should kids be when I'm letting them do these things? And I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. And there are a lot of theories. There are a lot of ideas out there about what's best. And frankly, what's best for a parent and their child or a family is up to that family to decide. But something that we reflect on from a school and classroom perspective is, and something that I share with parents, is, you know, when it comes to social media specifically, if we're talking about Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all of those things, those social media platforms, if you read the privacy policies and the terms of service that come along with those particular applications or those platforms, they say that a child needs to be 13 years old. 13. So the fact of the matter is we know that a lot of kids under 13 are using these tools and resources.
That's right.
And that's okay. But that has to be a family choice. There are a lot of children who are utilizing these resources not necessarily in the most appropriate way, but it's also a great place for a child to learn how to use them appropriately if they're living in that space alongside a parent. So sometimes when it comes to online safety, our kids start to explore that area first before parents are even really on board. And I just think it's very important to educate parents and families about here are the platforms your kids are using. And consider living there alongside them as a quiet follower. Right?
Yeah, you're not turning them loose out in the digital desert. You're actually right there, hopefully at their shoulder.
But we also know that doesn't happen a lot of the time too.
Right.
And especially, think of, for example, maybe a family that's in a single parent home, or maybe it's easier for an older sibling who is babysitting younger siblings when mom and dad are out working 2 jobs. It's super easy to just have access to a phone or to give your child access to a phone for quick and simple communication. So that everybody's accounted for. We know what to do if somebody's not safe. We have a device to make a phone call on. We don't have landlines in our homes really anymore, right? No. So a lot of kids who are under that 13-year-old age range have devices, and that's very normal and that's very common. But a lot of times they're in the hands of those kids for safety reasons, and mom and dad aren't necessarily concerned with or know exactly what else they're doing outside of just hey, you have a phone in case of emergency, call me.
Right.
They're just not necessarily privy to all of the other things that are there and that we explore as preteens and teenagers.
That's right. That's right. We talk about challenges. Cyberbullying is something that comes up on a regular basis. Things around whether things are facts or whether they're made up, all of that, I would assume, is part of the challenge that your organization and you specifically try to impart to teachers, parents, and students. How are some of those things handled in the Omaha Public Schools?
Yeah, those challenges arise every day in our lives, and not just with kids, but with adults too.
Yeah, sure.
Adults oftentimes need just as much education on media literacy and what is fact versus what is, being curated that's not necessarily true. So regarding how it's handled in the Omaha Public Schools, again, part of this common sense education role is to build that foundation as a prevention, so that hopefully in school we are having fewer incidents of cyberbullying, we're having fewer incidents of digital drama, and things like that, because we're teaching kids how to handle those things and what to do about them when they do arise. Now, it's not
isn't going to make it go away.
No, it's not.
And it doesn't mean that necessarily it arose out of the digital access.
Right.
It probably arose out of the normal connection between children.
Yes, because just like when we were growing up and we didn't have access to devices, these things still happened anyway. They're just amplified and they look different today. And it is an issue that we need to address, and it is something that we need to really talk about. But, I might get slack for this, but there's a big conversation going on right now about the phrase digital citizenship. And I would say when we say digital citizenship, what we really mean is just citizenship. You could drop the digital and you should be behaving behind a screen the same way that you are in real life.
Absolutely. But there's a certain amount of anonymity that comes.
Yes.
Even if you're using your name, there's still I can say something to you if I'm not looking at you, or if I'm in another room, or if I'm on a device. And I think that we really should treat people with empathy and in a way that don't get caught saying something you wouldn't,
That's absolutely true. And my heart melted a few weeks ago. We did a big recognition ceremony at our school board meeting of the 54 schools who earned this common sense certification last school year. And, so I had invited representatives from all of the schools, and I said, please try to bring kids if you can. It'd be great to have students there because this is the student spotlight. Well, there were probably about 15 students from various schools around the district. And I was prepared to speak at the board meeting and to the board, and I was the only one who I thought would be speaking, but the board wanted to speak to the children. So, of course, like I should have assumed that they did. I did not assume, however. And so these kids are looking at me terrified, like I set them up for something horrifying. And I had a couple of students who stepped up and they're like, I'll talk to the board. I was like, thank you so much. But they did, we had a couple students who were about middle school and early high school aged. And the young lady who is a middle school student, she said exactly that. She said, one of my favorite lessons from Common Sense that we did was when we talked about how you have to imagine as soon as you're typing something that you would say to another person, you have to imagine that you're standing directly in front of them.
Yes.
And if you would say it to their face, and, if that reaction would provoke emotion from them, like you need to visualize it and picture it. And I thought, God, that's the most empathetic. Like, that's it. But that's
some part of
teaching
that
empathy.
says then, if you're going to do it that way, why not just say it to their face? And why
Yes.
make it public?
Yep.
Why make it, it's almost as if you would say it over in front of them, to their face,
Yep.
over the loudspeaker that, goes to the whole entire school, because some of this is going to the whole entire world. And we've seen episode after episode of people and kids that have gotten in trouble and things that have gone sideways because of what you said earlier, the digital drama. And I think that drama exists, but drama is like a fire that is fairly contained.
Right.
But once you put it out there on the web or out there in the world, it really has a different motive and a different outcome.
It does. It really does. And the thing that I think is so interesting about this, and I don't know if it's due to the current climate that we are living in right now, specifically or what, but I see these issues just as much with adults than I do among children.
Absolutely.
And I have gotten caught up in these issues myself, where people have replied to even Facebook posts that I have posted, kind of just trying to stir the pot a little bit. And that's fine. What I would say to that, though, is that I think it's very important to, as grown-ups, if we see something that is being posted in an online space that is not okay, that is hateful, that is harmful, that is hurtful to a group of people, to whatever, just like we tell kids it's important to be an upstander instead of a bystander in a bullying situation, we need to do the same thing. It is important to not just allow that negativity to happen and not just look past it. Oh, they have an opinion that's different than mine, I'm looking past it. If we are seeing hateful things that people are seeing online, I think it's important to have a conversation and to be able to see both sides of the story, but I don't think it's helpful to ignore. And I think a lot of adults are saying, oh, I had to get off Facebook because I can't even look at the drama anymore.
And I have to admit, that's one of my common things is I'm not going to add to that confusion, that noise that goes on. But I don't disagree with you. One of the reasons we ask you to come by and talk to us is because you have a rare honor. You get to speak in front of TEDx. What is that going to be like for you, and what will you talk about?
What that's going to be like for me is the most exciting opportunity possible, but also one of the most horrifying things I'll probably ever do. I'm so excited, but I love to speak. I love to talk to people, but it's nerve evoking. So I've been working really hard, practicing and putting my talk together. And I will just say that we will have some very similar conversations to these, but I don't want to give away too much. Yeah. So we'll be talking about digital citizenship in some capacity, but you'll get to hear a little bit more of a personal side to it.
Are you pulling stats? Are you trying to track? And if you do, what are you measuring?
Like in my life with TEDx? What do you mean?
No, specifically in your role in the schools. I mean, how are you trying to, it isn't just that we got 35 more kids in front of a device. No. There must be something else that you're tracking.
Yeah, well, in my role, to focus my work, I have 3 goals that I focus on personally. And one of them are these certification efforts through Common Sense Media and Common Sense Education. All 93 of our schools and programs this year will earn that certification.
Is that an annual thing? They have to earn it every year?
But last year was the first time that we had enough schools to earn that district certification,
more
which
than
is
50%.
really
That's
exciting.
great.
Yes. So of my 54 schools that earned the certification last year, that leaves us with the remainder who I will really work hard to focus on getting them a program created and in place that they can start doing this year after year. For the schools who certified in the past, they kind of have built a nice sustainable program that it makes it easier to repeat year after year. But those conversations and those lessons in the classroom, the meat and potatoes of what that looks like, those things change every year. And become more relevant based on, what is going on in the world of media around them and outside the four walls of the classroom. So even if we're doing a similar lesson year after year, like the lesson changes because the conversation changes, right? So it's just important to be having those conversations in our schools and classrooms. So those efforts are my priority. But another one of my major focus areas is community outreach and parent education. Yeah. So part of that is tied to those certification efforts of those schools, but part of it isn't. I work very closely with a lot of nonprofit organizations in our community who either are trying to help support some of these same ideas, or they have technology focuses as an organization and they get a lot of questions from parents and families. So I work really closely with Do Space, for example, do a ton of programming with them, have trained their staff on how to use these resources and where to find them. So if they get asked questions, they can point them to Common Sense Media and Common Sense Education resources. And the parent education is my favorite part. I speak at a lot of PTA and PTO meetings. I would
think that's the part that probably needs the most work. Speaking as a parent.
Yeah, because as a parent, you have so many questions, right? You are very, very genuinely concerned about how your child is using media, and you want to know how to keep them safe and how to help support them, right? So. That is an audience that I work very closely with, and always am open and available to parents of our families and our schools too.
Thank you so much for your great work. Keep up the good work. We look forward to hearing about your experience as a TEDx speaker.
Thank you.
And your continued success as a resource, a very important resource as we move into the continue to move through the digital age here in the Omaha Public Schools.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate being here.